The reality of money in capitalism is credit money. This is the objective form of capitalism today, which is the financialization of all sectors of the economy. If this is the objective form of capital, then what is its subjective form? Let us go back to Benjamin's idea that capitalism is a religion. Of course, he is not saying that objectively speaking that capitalism is a religion, but subjectively. It has its own beliefs and rituals and its own god, which is money. Here I suggested Feuerbach's analysis of religion can help us. He describes 3 moments of religious belief: objectification, externalisation, and alienation. In the first moment, we objectify and universalize human predicates, like love and justice, for example. Then we externalize these predicates in a transcendent God. And finally, we alienate these predicates from ourselves. Only God can be truly love and justice. These 3 moments always reinforce one another. So the more that we externalize predicates in a transcendent God, the more they are objectified, fixed for all time. And the more that they are objectified and externalized, then the more that we are alienated from ourselves. Money operates in the same way. We forget that the real origin of money is ourselves. We externalize it as a neutral economic variable and alienate ourselves from the origin of money. It is not we who control money, but money that controls us. Think of the way that people speak about markets as a mysterious force or power that controls every moment of our lives and to whom we must bow down to as though like a god, as though it were outside of society, and towards which no one has any control or responsibility. Like Feuerbach, we must deconstruct this new God, which is not even a God of love and justice, but, as Benjamin suggests, one of universal debt and guilt. Rather than money being the origin of us, are we not the origin of money? Is not the real origin of money social and political, rather than a mysterious transcendent power? We saw that the more abstract money has become, the more the real social and political origin has been concealed. The irony is, as we saw in the previous installment, money has always been abstract. It is not money as a medium of exchange that explains money of account, but money of account that explains money as a medium of exchange. And the condition of money of account is always political authority. Again, we might compare money with religion. Is not the basis of religion always political power? And do not religion, money, and the state appear together in human history? The dematerialization of money is nowhere more apparent than in the financial crisis of 2008. The Marxist political theorist David Harvey gave an explanation of this crisis at the Royal Society of Arts in London in 2010. He said that there were many external explanations of this crisis given by economists, and there is much truth to them, but he wanted to give an internal explanation of this crisis and from a Marxist perspective. David Harvey is only describing the objective side of the crisis of capital, But there is also the subjective side. If what sustains financial capital is universal debt, as Benjamin describes, why do we all believe in this debt? Why are we all willing to sacrifice ourselves to this debt? The subjective side of financial capital is described in the concept of human capital. Foucault, in his lectures on biopolitics in 1979, was one of the first people to be interested in this new concept, and it is worth following his argument in some detail. First of all, he explains the historical context of the birth of this concept. In both Europe and America, neoliberalism, out of which the concept of human capital arises, is a reaction against the welfare state and the New Deal. The difference between Europe and America, however, is that there is no history of a strong state in the United States. Liberalism is the status quo, and indeed, the American state is founded on the idea of liberalism. This means that the New Deal is an anomaly in the history of America. This means, because liberalism is the founding myth of America, there is a kind of liberal utopianism which we do not find in Europe. This is the fertile ground for the birth of the concept of human capital. Of course, this idea has now been exported to Europe and elsewhere in the world. The idea of human capital is important in two ways, Foucault says. One, it extends the limit of economic analysis, and two, following from this, gives economic explanations of domains that were not previously thought of as economic at all. In classical economics, production is broken down to three elements: capital, land, and labour. And the third category is given less importance. Labour is reduced to cost, and the cost is a quantity of time. This is also the case for Marx, Foucault adds. Even though he gives more importance to labour, he still thinks of labour in terms of quantified time. These new economists would argue that classical economists and Marx are not describing what labour really is, but an abstract variable in an economic model. What is labour in reality then? It is an activity and therefore must be understood subjectively. Before we go further into Foucault's explanation of this new conception of labour, it is worth saying a little bit about Foucault's method. In his description of neoliberalism, he is not making a normative choice. He's not claiming that it gives an accurate description of labour for all time, or that neoliberalism is a good thing. What concerns Foucault are regimes of truth, how truth claims produce reality, rather than truth being an accurate picture of reality that somehow stands outside of it. Human capital is a description of an event I would call the subjectification of capital. As we shall see, the more that capital conceives of itself subjectively, the more we conceive of ourselves to be capital. How then are we to conceive of work subjectively? We have to think of it as a substitutional choice. How do individuals allocate scarce resources to alternative ends? The question of labour is not an abstract quantity of time that is measured in a price or cost, but how a person uses the means available to them. Why do people work? The answer is to earn a wage. Wage is an income for the worker, but an income is not the same as a price. Income is a return on capital. What kind of capital is this? Subjectively, it is the abilities and skills of the individual. Objectively, it is an income stream. This income stream fluctuates over a lifetime of the individual. I earned little or nothing as a child, more during my middle years, and less again when I'm older. What interests Foucault is what kind of self corresponds to this new subjectivity. The individual increasingly comes to see herself as an enterprise. We all become self-entrepreneurs. This idea of human capital means that all aspects of human existence are appropriated by capital for what cannot be seen as a future income stream. Human capital is made up of two elements, innate and acquired. Foucault spends most of his lecture talking about acquired human capital, because that is what these new economists of neoliberalism describe. But he does say that innate human capital will become more important in the future, especially in the direct manipulation of human genetics. What was once considered to be science fiction is now a possible future reality. What then is acquired human capital? It is an educational investment. Education here is considered very broadly. It is not merely schooling or professional development, but would include things like childcare, for example. Indeed, anything that increases a possible future income stream could be considered to be an educational investment. As we said previously, Foucault is concerned with describing regimes of truth and how subjects are produced. He is not claiming this is a good or bad thing, or making a political or ethical judgment. This does not stop us making judgments, and elsewhere in his interviews, for example, Foucault does. So, for example, we might ask ourselves, ethically speaking, whether we do want to conceive of ourselves as capital. We might also ask ourselves whether so doing leads to a political impasse. Tronti, an Italian political writer, in his book Workers and Capital, for example, argues that as soon as workers see themselves as capital, then politics comes to an end. This will be the topic of our next video essay.